Okay, so we'll take a moment and set our motivation. Remember that we're here together, listening to teachings, trying to train our minds so that we can become better people. And we do that in dependence upon all those around us, because we need sentient beings to be able to practice patience, to practice joyous effort for their benefit, and all of the 6 far-reaching attitudes. And we do this for them because we know that they are suffering. We know what suffering feels like ourselves. And we wouldn't wish that upon anybody. And not just to alleviate their suffering, but also to bring them happiness, contentment. And the best way to do this is to accomplish the ultimate goal of Buddhahood, so that spontaneously we will work for the benefit of others without needing to filter through our negative attitudes. We'll just know instantly what needs to be done. So let's generate that thought, that wish. So, I'm Venerable Jampel, and I'm here taking over after Venerable Chini, doing reviews of Venerable Chudrin's teachings, which she's teaching on a text by a Tibetan master named Nam Kapel, and the title of the text is Mind Training Like Rays of the Sun. So the whole genre of mind training, even just the title, really, I think, has a very nice feel to it. The ability to be able to decide how we want to think, how we want to feel at any particular time is very empowering. I think we need more of that, just as people, but especially in our culture. I think sometimes a feeling of victim can pervade, and how the other people are causing my suffering. I mean, we really are big on activism, and the kind of angry activism, not just, working for the benefit, but really getting angry at the people who are harming us and harming the world and harming the people we care about. So I think deciding how we want to think can really help us to set down some of those really aggressive or angry thoughts, and not necessarily set down the cause that we have. We can still work for the benefit of others, but change the way we think, and we can do it in a much happier way if we can work with our minds. So I am picking up on teachings about how to cherish sentient beings, because working with this self-centered thought that we all have that pervades all the time, we spend most of our time kind of circling around the self-centered thought. Really the way to get through this in a very realistic way, every day-to-day way, is to really just to stop thinking about ourselves and to cherish other people. And as soon as we can do that, there's not really space for any self-centered thought. So I just kind of went through Venerable's teachings, two teachings on the cherishing of others. And I didn't write anything down verbatim, so anything I quote isn't really a quote, it's all paraphrased, and it all comes from my perspective, so it's not necessarily what was actually taught to begin with, but that's okay. So the first thing that came up in the teaching was to give all the victory and profit to sentient beings, because all kinds of goodness is accumulated by relying upon them. And that's just what I was saying in the motivation, which is the fact that without sentient beings, we cannot generate good qualities, because our good qualities are love and compassion and kindness, generosity. None of these things can be done without other sentient beings. I mean, not necessarily we have to have, people all around us to do this, but this state of mind is dependent on sentient beings. You can't think of being generous to a tree. I mean, I guess you can think of giving it water, but it really doesn't have the same quality of being generous to somebody who's in need. Yeah. So we really need sentient beings for that. And then from the text, Namkapel says to take all the loss and defeat upon ourselves, because all harm and suffering comes from holding ourselves dear. Now, this gets into a little bit of a tricky place, because we do need to care for ourselves, and we need to hold ourselves dear in the sense that we need to care for our body and care for our mind state and make sure that we are healthy and capable. But if we're doing this for any reason other than the benefit of others, then we've fallen into a sort of self-centered thought, an attitude of I am important. And really, we are only important in the sense that we have the ability to help others. And that's very, very important. But there's nothing beyond that. And that needs to be remembered. So when we hear things about how we take suffering upon ourselves, we really need to make the differentiation that we're taking the suffering upon our self-centeredness, upon the self that kind of pervades, in the sense that most of the time I'm self-centered. So that's the self that needs to take the suffering. It's not the self that is caring for others. It's not just the general self who wakes up in the morning. I'm not a bad person because I am self-centered. I need to remember that, and it's just the mind state that thinks I am important. I need more than other people. They can go without this time because I want a little more. So that's the point where we really need to take that on. So Namkapel says that if we practice in this way, just as food poisoning will lay a person low, also our self-centered thought will be laid low by our practice of caring for others and really taking the suffering upon the self-centeredness. And Venerable actually emphasizes to really test this out and see what that means. But then, and she also goes on to say that self-centeredness is the root of our suffering. It really is. It's what is there. But that's kind of where she leaves it, and she moves on. And I think that actually needs to be unpacked quite a bit, at least for myself, because I'm not so necessarily convinced of that most of the time. I usually think that caring for myself is what's going to really make me happy, because, as Venerable says, if I don't care for myself, who will? So that's a valid point, I think, in my mind, and I really have to analyze and figure out what's really going on there. So I think doing a little bit of analysis and looking, when I'm angry, is there self-centeredness there? When I'm feeling a sense of anger in my mind, do I have any self-centeredness? I think that's pretty much a definite yes. I don't know that there's ever a point in time when I get angry and it has absolutely nothing to do with me. I just can't even imagine a situation where it just doesn't work. It always has something to do with me. Even if I'm angry about people in Africa who are getting murdered by somebody else, it still comes back to my own wanting that to stop happening. It really has nothing to do with those people when I'm angry about it. So when I have a concern about it, then I think it's not self-centered necessarily. But when the anger arises, then it comes back to my own self-centeredness. So pretty definitely, anytime there's anger, there's self-centeredness. So that's a good tip, that maybe, hey, self-centeredness isn't so good. Maybe we need to think about what we're doing there. But then the other question is, well, then you can say, well, maybe they arise in conjunction. Maybe anger arises. Maybe somebody does something bad, I get angry, and that's why the self-centeredness arises. But if that were the situation, then there should be a moment of anger without self-centeredness. At least just one brief moment sometime in our past. So that can't be the case. They have to, at the very least, arise together. So then the next question I would ask, is there ever self-centeredness without anger? And I think that, in my experience, is a definite yes. I think I have lots of self-centeredness when I'm attached, when I'm jealous, when I'm greedy, when any other afflicted emotion at all. If I go through each one of those mind states one by one, I will most definitely, in my experience, find self-centeredness at the root of it. So if that's the case, then I really need to re-examine what the self-centeredness is, and why is it so pervasive through all the suffering, and really what's going on there. Because if we can really figure that out and really be just so sure that the self-centeredness causes these things, then we would just let it go. And if we just let go of the causes of suffering, then we won't be able to suffer. So it sounds very easy. But I think confidence in the teachings, and in this teaching especially, is really, really important. Because it's so easy to sit here and just say, oh, self-centeredness is horrible. I don't want to, hold myself more dear than others. You think about other people who are self-centered, and you think, what a self-centered jerk, or, they're so selfish, and it's so considered not a good quality. And so it's just so easy to say, well, just go ahead and, yeah, it's bad. But then as soon as the moment arises when I'm not getting what I think I deserve, I'm off on a tangent, and I'm just so wrapped up in my own self. But if I was really, really convinced, really down to my heart convinced that that was the cause of my suffering, then I would think twice. I wouldn't necessarily know how to solve the problem, but I would just stop and I'd say, is this what I want to be doing right now? Is there something else I can do right now? Because I think in my experience, oftentimes I recognize that there is something else. And I just say, I don't know, maybe there's the Dharma I could use, maybe, but that person's really a jerk. And so I think I'm going to stick with being angry at them. And it's really subtle, and sometimes, it slips right by, but, sometimes there's the moment of maybe they were right when they said that. But it's so much easier to just try to, push away the harmful things and bring close the things that we like. It seems easier, at least. It seems easier to control the environment. Of course, in reality, it couldn't be harder to control our environment. It seems so much easier to just change our mind. That seems like the simplest thing to do. We don't even have to stand up. We don't have to push anybody out. We don't have to pull anybody close. There's none of that at all. We just have to stop and change the way we think. So I think that's something I really, really need to contemplate over and over again and spend a lot of time on. And that's what Venerable is saying, is to really test this out. Look again and again through each of our experiences, one at a time. Pick them up and look at the mind, look at the state we're in, look at the way we treat the people that we care about, and just really be convinced. I think that's her main weight there. She says test out this doctrine, which she doesn't often say. So, she always wants us to test it out, but she doesn't usually really kind of drive it home like, you need to take this very thing that I'm saying right now and go do it. And I think that really means something. So she very clearly said that our craving is the cause of our suffering. Our craving, of course, coming from self-centeredness, because the moment we have an idea of self and then we start thinking we're important, then all we want to do is bring good things to us and push away the bad things. So craving can be craving for something good and also craving to really get away from something painful. And that very craving is the problem. It's not the lack of, or it's not getting what we want, because the craving is there first. I always think of, you can have a small child and you can say, hello, Billy, would you like some ice cream? And they'll say, yes, I love ice cream. Say, what kind of ice cream do you want? And I'll say, mint chocolate chip, because that's my favorite. And then if you say to them, well, too bad, you're not getting any ice cream, they're going to be distraught. They're going to start crying and say, you're a horrible person. I want ice cream, I want ice cream, I want ice cream. So what's harming them there? Is it not having the ice cream? Even though if you had never said that, they would have never thought about it and they would have just been perfectly fine. Never brought up the thing. They would have just gone about playing in the grass or whatever, and no thought. But you put that in their mind, the craving arises. I want ice cream. Ice cream is so good. Then when they don't get what they want, when we don't get what we want, then the suffering comes. And another good point about this is that we can sit and come up with ideas, here, especially during teachings. Venerable's teaching, she's so convincing. You say, yeah, that's really right. She's almost like one of those guys on a podium that can just sell you anything. Yeah, you're right, Venerable. I like that. But then you can kind of walk away, and the second the mind changes, and suddenly there is anger in the mind, then the perspective is just completely turned. Because usually we don't sit in teachings angry. I mean, usually we're like happy to have teachings, or at least grateful. So there isn't that anger there. So we're not working with that emotion at the very moment. So when our mind changes and the anger comes in, then all the good, good talk and the good logic that Venerable put out there, or any of our teachers put out there, it just kind of goes out the window, and we say, well, that doesn't sound right. I mean, yeah, that's right, but not in this situation. This situation, I'm actually justified in being angry at that person. They deserve it. They're a bad person. So I think we really need to sit and spend a lot of time developing a very clear understanding of how these things work and how the mind moves through self-centeredness into the anger, into the attachment, and watching and really tracing it again and again. And as we do that, and we start feeling very, very confident in it, and just so sure, yes, this must be right, then in that moment to actually start maybe pulling out some of the self-centered thoughts tricks. Pulling out, what about this situation right here where that person really was a jerk? And still holding in mind, oh yes, these teachings are very true and very right, and then bringing in the self-centered thought and trying to very gently hold it up against it. And we need to do it very gently, because we could just make the self-centered mind beat out our very clear logic, and then we'll just get angry and walk away. But if we do it gently and we hold the clear logic of the Dharma with a little bit of weight, really quite sure and confident in it, then when we set it next to the self-centered thought, it will just be crushed by the self-centered thought, or the self-centered thought will be crushed by the clear logic of the Dharma. And I think just that very action of really feeling the self-centered thought and feeling it get destroyed by Dharma brings about a great confidence. So actually doing that, then we start thinking, oh yeah, this actually applies to our life in the moment that I'm angry. It actually makes sense right now. And then maybe bring some more little, what about last week when I was so angry? And kind of bring that mind back just a little bit, and thinking about how kind of yeah, maybe that did make sense. And then just bashing it down with the Dharma and just totally annihilating that whole thought. And doing that again and again and again. And as we do that, the confidence is greater and greater. And then the second the mind of anger comes in, we've already got that sort of mental texture associated with a defeated position, a position of mind that's already been proven wrong. So just the texture of mind comes in, and we just say, I know this is wrong. I know it from the inside. I've felt it to get proved wrong. So I'm just going to drop it, and I'm going to turn my mind to what the position that I know is accurate, position that I know will bring about happiness and really leave behind the suffering. And I think that also is a very, very important thing to do and remember. Especially, I think that's especially why we spend so much time sitting in meditation, sitting quietly on our cushions, so that we can, they say the laboratory of the mind, so we can really experiment with these things. And experimenting isn't just reciting the reasons why this is right and the reasons why that is wrong, the reasons why this brings goodness and the reason why this brings suffering. We need to know those reasons, but there's more to it than that, because we can recite every text in the Kangir, and we can memorize every text, every commentary, and know it all front and back. But if we don't apply it, there's no point, there's no reason. It's not going to help us any. And there's plenty of I think they called them Buddhologists, people who actually study Buddhism and are not Buddhist. Of course, they're going to be profoundly affected by the teachings that they read, but aren't that concerned about the Dharma. And they're totally, they might know the Dharma better than you. You might sit there and, I've been a monastic, I know what the Dharma is, and then start talking to them, and they just blow your idea of the Dharma out of the water. But no really understanding in the sense that they don't have it integrated into their lives. And it doesn't do them any good. What good is it? It's just a bunch of words. Okay, so that was kind of a little bit of the end of cherishing ourselves and the disadvantages of that. And then she starts moving into the section about putting into practice the contemplations on caring for others. And this is really what the pith is, I think. We really need to know the problems with being self-centered, but the antidote to me seems to remember others, and that just cuts it out. So this is a very important section. Nam Kapel from the text says, meditate on the kindness of all beings. And it's all beings. It's not, some beings or most beings. It's not the beings who are near and help do my laundry, but it's the beings everywhere. And how the interconnectedness between all of this is what makes us able to do what we do. It's what makes us able to live in this house. I don't even know the people who built this house. I don't know the people who lived in this house before the Abbey started here. I've never met them before, and they probably did so many things to the house that I don't even appreciate, but I utilize on a daily basis. I don't even realize. So many people everywhere. From the people who build the roads, from the people who clean the facilities that we use, the public facilities. I've never thought about them. Venerable very clearly points out, who cleans the metro? Who cleans the buses that we ride on in the city? Do we ever think about that? No, I do think about when my feet are stuck to the floor, when they didn't clean it well enough, and I complain, but I don't think, oh wow, my feet aren't stuck to the floor today. That's so wonderful, somebody came here and did this for me. So that's the side of it that's really concern for sentient beings, in the sense that their kindness in the way that they live their life. We rely on that kindness, which is one side of it. The other side of it is that concern for sentient beings and caring for sentient beings, because that's what brings about, independence upon them, we generate good qualities. So there's those two sides. We need them to get through our day. Otherwise, we couldn't even survive one day. And also we need them to become enlightened, which is so important. So, I have usually have some struggle in my own meditations with the kindness of sentient beings. I like to think that I'm self-sufficient and capable of doing whatever I want, whenever I want. But it doesn't really hold up against the logic. But love and compassion, it says, Nam Kapel says that love and compassion are vital in the beginning, the middle, and the end of the great vehicle. In every aspect of the great vehicle, there's not a portion of it where we don't need love and compassion. It's very important. And in fact, we need love and compassion for sentient beings throughout. And we also need sentient beings to have love and compassion. So we can't think that we can just go off and generate love and compassion and we'll just move right through and attain enlightenment and avoid all those annoying people that we don't like. It doesn't work. And a very good point that Nam Kapel in the text brought up was that we respect the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, and we respect them for their great love and compassion. And if we've ever even seen just, regular sentient beings who have great love and great compassion, who have been through very painful situations and held their love and compassion and care for others, we have so much respect for that. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who looks at that person and says, what a loser, they should have gone out and got a real job, or, why are you so nice to other people? The world's a horrible place, it's going to hell in a handbasket. You might say those things, but when you actually meet somebody with love and compassion, that's not going to be in your mind. You're just going to feel that, and there's going to be the acknowledgement of that quality, and also the great respect for that person for carrying that quality, and really, really acknowledging that that person has almost a status above ourselves, just really saying, I aspire to have that. I'm not there. So a lot of respect for that. And it doesn't make any sense for us to respect those who have these good qualities, love and compassion, and not to respect the object of their love and compassion. So to forget that their love and compassion is not directed towards a tree. It's directed towards sentient beings who are suffering, and that's it. And so if we don't remember that, if we don't acknowledge that and really hold that in mind and care for sentient beings, then we've missed the whole point. Because if you say, I really respect that person for having love and compassion, but I don't at all respect sentient beings, they're a bunch of jerks, most of them that I met I don't like, I just want to be alone, and this person's really great. But if you don't like the sentient beings that they are caring for, then you look at that person and you have to acknowledge, their opinion's different from mine. And usually I think my opinion's right and other people's is wrong. So then I would probably say, that person, the Buddha, I think he might be wrong. I don't like sentient beings so much. His love and compassion might be misplaced. He should be having it for me, but others, I don't know. And then we depreciate the qualities of the Buddha and we say, I don't know about the Buddha altogether. And then we don't, we should just go find another religion like hedonism and just forget about Buddhism altogether. There's no point. What's the point of the Buddha's good qualities without caring for sentient beings? There really isn't one. Again, they reiterate that the 6 far-reaching attitudes and the 4 ways of gathering disciples are all generated in respect to sentient beings. And these are very, very profound practices that are way far, from where I am ready to practice, way far. And the whole focus is on sentient beings. The whole culmination of the path is completely focusing on sentient beings. There's no part of that doesn't involve them. And Venerable Tarpa actually during the teachings brought up a good point, which is what the wisdom and compassion, or concentration and wisdom. What do those have to do with sentient beings? And because you generate concentration. It's not like we're sitting here hugging each other and, meditating on how much I like you. We meditate single-pointedly. Of course, Venerable Chudrin pointed out that Some of the concentration meditations involve like the 4 far-reaching attitudes. So the 4 immeasurables, that didn't sound right. The 4 immeasurable thoughts. So wanting others to be happy, to be free from suffering, to have equanimity, and to attain sorrowless bliss, and to attain freedom from suffering, or enlightenment, I guess you would say, or liberation. So we can meditate on those and generate concentration. That's one way to develop it. So at least in that regard, that would involve sentient beings. But to say that sentient beings are important at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the path, to say that every good quality arises dependent upon them, doesn't mean that we spend every single moment solely focused on sentient beings. The two aren't contradictory. We don't ever neglect them, but there are times when the focus must change, and to develop concentration, single-pointedness, we have to really focus the mind in on a single object. And so not necessarily do we need to hold sentient beings in like a mind of love at that very moment. We need to really fully engross our mind in the practice. But the purpose for doing that in this path, in the great vehicle path, is for the benefit of others. And still, even though just because as it is that way that we have to do it, that we are doing it to benefit them, we also do it in reliance upon them. Number one, we have the general day-to-day upkeep, being able to live, having the food we need, having the knowledge of the Dharma. It's from sentient beings. It's from Buddhas, but sentient beings also carry it down. So we need it in that sense. And also we need the sentient beings to develop wisdom, because mainly we focus on the selflessness of persons. And what are persons? They're sentient beings. So we, of course, the view of the perishing aggregates is the most crucial of that, which is our own aggregates, our own self as dissolving, and the fear of that. But also, that doesn't mean we stop meditating on the fact that, that are other sentient beings and the selflessness of other sentient beings. So both of those practices are involved with sentient beings, although they don't actually necessarily constantly hold them dear in the sense of being wrapped up with them all the time. So there's space there, I think. And then Venerable Chögyam went into her wonderful story about how she went on pilgrimage to India, and how she went with a monk who she'd known for a long time, and at some point he was having some trouble and things weren't going so well, and she offered to help, and he blew up on her and told her all the horrible things. Here you did this, there you did that, this and this, such a horrible things, and just bringing them back and giving them to her. And she just talked about how she practiced with that, and how she just took all those criticisms and gave them right to the mind that was self-centered. And the self-centered mind is the cause of this. The self-centered mind is the cause of this. And she didn't actually go into whether or not the actions that she did were harmful actions, or whether or not the person perceived them in that way. Because oftentimes people do very kind things to us, and we perceive them as quite horribly unkind things, and the person's definitely going to the hell realm for it, for sure. So she didn't elaborate on that, and I thought about why that was. And I realized that it's because it doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with the story. It has nothing to do with the point. And the point is that the self-centeredness is going to be the cause of the cause of our suffering. So if we didn't do the harmful things that we're being accused of, then self-centeredness was the cause of the karma that is what's ripening and causing our suffering. So even though we didn't do anything, we still did something at some point to deserve the self-centered, the retribution coming back because of our self-centered thought. And then if we did do it, of course, then definitely we can say even more with joy and enthusiasm. We can give all of the criticism to our self-centeredness. And when somebody says, you did this, and we can just say, yes, I did that, and that was horribly self-centered. And that's it. We don't have to be free from self-centeredness immediately. It's okay that we have failed here and there along to not necessarily hold all the Dharma principles perfectly. We're not Buddhas. If we were, this wouldn't be a problem. But obviously, it comes up for me here and there. So that's why I'm talking about it here and there daily. So really, I thought that was quite empowering, because we can talk about karma, and that's wonderful, and I think it very much explains a lot. But if I can stop in the moment of being criticized and say, not only did my karma create this, but actually I did what this person is telling me. This person is criticizing me, and I actually did it. And if I really think about it, I'm getting angry right now because I actually was pretty self-centered at the time, and I'm trying to defend that. And I can just stop and say, no, I don't need to do all that. It's not necessary. It was a self-centered thought. That's not what I aspire for. That's not what I'm going towards. Of course, it comes up. But it's not me. I am not my self-centered thought. So just move the blame over there, and the next time self-centered thought comes up, we can say, I didn't really like the outcome of that so much, so I'm gonna maybe try a different path and think of some other ways we can treat people. And there's lots of other ways, such as seeing sentient beings as the source of the cause and result of full awakening. So the cause, of course, they're the source of the cause for attaining Buddhahood, because, as I said, the 6 far-reaching attitudes and the 4 ways of gathering and all good qualities dependent upon sentient beings. But also they are the source for the result, which means that they are the source for the Buddha's activities. The Buddha only acts to try to benefit sentient beings. So if the Buddha, didn't care to benefit sentient beings, or if you became a Buddha by some other means, then that wouldn't be necessary. The Buddha wouldn't go around helping sentient beings, and then the Buddha wouldn't come into the world, and he wouldn't teach the Dharma. We wouldn't have any of these things. So the reason we have the Dharma, the reason we have teachers, the reason we have all of this, is because of sentient beings. It's because they are the result, the causal result of Buddhahood to create. I don't know if that's making any sense. Terms are confusing. They are the source of the result. They are what the result is focused upon. They are what the Buddha is focused upon. The Buddha doesn't care about gardening. The Buddha doesn't care about anything unless it is in relation to sentient beings. So I'm sure the Buddha cares about the environment, but it's only because sentient beings live in the environment. He doesn't care about the environment if there's no sentient beings there. It's not important. It's nil, null, something like that. It's unimportant. And then the text goes on to say that both high rebirth and enlightenment, liberation, come from caring for sentient beings. So that's just quite clear, you can't lose. There's not going to be a bad result from caring for others. It's just good. So we can get any thoughts out of our head like, oh, if I care for others, then I won't have enough for myself, and I'll suffer, and that's just not realistic unless we're looking at a very narrow perspective of this very moment. I'm not getting what I want right now. Then when things are that black and white, and we have to say that someone's getting something and that means someone else is losing out, then we start getting in the mindset of self-cherishing, because I need to have it. But when we look on a wide view, a wide perspective, cherishing others brings about happiness. So that sounds good. And as Venerable always likes to remind us, that cherishing others doesn't mean we do everything they want. It doesn't mean that we give a drug addict drugs. It doesn't mean that we, as she said, the example, open up the coffers of the monastery and give it to all the drunks on the street, that want their alcohol. So, really the greatest thing that we can do if we cherish sentient beings, the greatest action that we can do when we really decide that we want to help them and we've made that decision, is to just stop and practice the Dharma. That is the greatest thing to do. In my mind, I can't see a more powerful way to benefit others. And I think that's for two reasons. One, that we'll stop harming, which is, wow. If I just stopped harming people, there would be a lot happier people in the world, because I spend a lot of my time doing that. But also, practicing the Dharma will get us the good qualities, lead us to enlightenment, and help us to benefit. Like skillful means. What a wonderful thing that would be, to know the minds of others, to know what they need when they're suffering, and to be able to give it to them without having to kind of analyze or figure out. We just look at them and we say, I know what you're going through, and I know what mind state that is, and I know what you need. And just give it freely. That doesn't come about through self-centeredness. That comes about through practicing the Dharma. It doesn't come about through worldly means, through building hospitals, through doing all these different worldly things, which are important. I don't want to say that caring for sentient beings now isn't important. That's very important, because people are suffering now, and their suffering is just as palpable as anything else. It's no different than my suffering. So we can't neglect the fact that people are suffering now, and they're suffering in a worldly sense a lot of the time. Though I think a lot of the worldly suffering can be alleviated very quickly if we had skillful means. But some people aren't even receptible to that. Some people can't hear the Dharma at all. They speak of Devadatta, who was the Buddha's cousin, and all he wanted to do was, destroy the Buddha, knock him off his high horse and take over himself. And the Buddha could have given him all the Dharma in the world, and I'm sure he did, but it didn't help. So there are still things that can help. We can still provide for people in worldly ways, but it's not the main focus of our practice. Our practice here as monastics, as people who follow the great vehicle, is to change our mind. But the two aren't contradictory either. We can change our mind while we build hospitals, while we care for other beings. So, holding all of that. Our outward actions depend upon the situation. They change depending what's happening at the time. If people need certain things, we have to assess whether or not those things will be beneficial, if they'll really bring about the intended result, which is to bring them happiness. And we have to ask ourselves, compassion is the wish for others to be free from suffering. Is my action going to move them towards that goal? And really stop and think about that. And then Kapel states that every kind of trouble comes from neglecting sentient beings, which is a pretty bold statement, I would say. But I think on a very realistic level, the second we stop holding sentient beings dear, and the second we not even get angry at them, but just kind of put them down to the side and just say, well, maybe later I'll help you out, then it's just the ripe fertile ground for self-centeredness. And the second we have fertile ground for self-centeredness, I know in my experience, the second somebody does something harmful to me, it doesn't take but a second for that harmfulness or the self-centeredness to come right up. So fertile ground is not good for us. If we want to get rid of self-centeredness, we don't need that fertile ground for it to flourish. It's just too easy. It's too many years of habituation, too many lifetimes of habituation. But then Venerable Chögyam points out that pushing them away, even just setting them down, that very action is self-centeredness. Because we already recognize that taking others, caring for them, and benefiting them brings about enlightenment and brings about higher rebirth. So just that very action of setting them aside is a self-centered action. Although it's not necessarily driven by the 8 worldly concerns, there is the more subtle self-centeredness, which is the self-centeredness of, I want to become enlightened, I want to become liberated, which isn't all wrapped up in the world, but at the same time says, everybody's equal out there, except that I am slightly more important in that I am me. I'm just a person, but I'm the one who experiences my experiences. So I need to go ahead and get my enlightenment because I'm the only one who can do it. And of course I'll be a good role model for sentient beings and whatnot, but I got to get this here. I got to get out of samsara, which is important to have the wish to be free, but to forget other beings is not good, especially if you're part of the great vehicle system. And it's very easy to do, I think, especially when we're so wrapped up in our suffering, especially when we start to sit down and really meditate very deeply, and we start having small realizations or a calmer mind, and we just go, wow, it'd be so great to just kind of keep going with this, and just maybe I don't need to come out of this and start thinking about compassion and start thinking about sentient beings. I think that's very slippery, and we need to be careful of that. Oops. And then Venerable Chögyam says that all the suffering of the lower realms, without exception, comes from harming sentient beings. So all the torment of the hell realms, the ignorance of the animal realms, and the craving of the predator realms comes solely, without exception, from harming sentient beings. And that is a very even more bold statement in my sense, but I think it might be true. Because I think about it, it's like any of the causes for all of the 10 non-virtues, every one of them is in relation to sentient beings. Every one of them. There isn't anything in there that isn't related to others. I don't know if I really put that together. That's a more recent realization there. That's the whole point. It's sentient beings. And I think it's important to remember we harm sentient beings. We do this all the time. But the sentient beings, we get angry at them and we want them to suffer. So we harm them. But we can cut out a whole section of that. If we're angry and we want sentient beings to suffer, we can just stop because they're already suffering. That's the whole point. That's why they're sentient beings. Their whole life, just like ours, is wrapped up in suffering and wrapped up in the attachment and the aversion and pushing and pulling, and it just wears on the mind and it becomes so tiring. And if we look around at the people around us, they're tired. They're tired of the self-centeredness. They don't realize it, but they're tired of that suffering, and they're tired of the cause of the suffering, but they don't know what it is. They just think, if I get what I want, I'll be happy. They don't know. So there's no need to even harm sentient beings. We can just throw the whole, all that effort that we put into, getting back the people we don't like. We can just stop. We can just say, okay, they're suffering, that's it. I don't need to do anything there. And realize also that when we actually harm sentient beings, we're just harming ourselves because of the very statement. All suffering of the lower realms, without exception, comes from harming sentient beings. So again, it's widening our perspective and looking at more than one moment of time and saying, yeah, okay, I harmed you now, and I'm, benefiting from that now. I get to gloat and laugh at you who is suffering. And so it seems, in a very small sense, like, yes, I'm getting something out of this, I'm getting pleasure. But if we look at any wide-angle perspective, anything beyond this life, going to the lower realms definitely is not worth creating some suffering for other people. That's not. And Venerable points out that even just sitting and thinking of harming, sitting, because we do this, we go and sit in our meditation session, and suddenly something comes up, and it's just so pissed off. Like, God, those people, and if I had just said this to them, that would have been the nice zinger, and then they would have regretted what they did to me. But actually, I heard that, and I thought that, wow, that's actually a contradiction, because just a moment before she said all the suffering of the lower realms comes from harming sentient beings. But who am I harming if I just sit in my meditation and I think ill will? But if I look at the 10 non-virtues, malice, I don't need to actually act to have malice, and that can be the cause for rebirth in the lower realm. So, what's the contradiction there? What's going on? And I thought about that a little bit, and I realized that those actions of malice, especially for those of us who are Buddhists, especially for those of us who are in the Mahayana, thinking negative thoughts like that, harmful, angry thoughts like that, harms our own good qualities. It reduces our ability to help others. It regresses us on the path. And that is a harm to sentient beings, especially because we're trying to become Buddhas. And so every minute that we're still mired in samsara, sentient beings are suffering, and we're not there to help them. So that is a major, major harm to sentient beings. That's like taking the Buddha out of the world for as long as you're angry. Find one Buddha and just remove him completely from the world for the entire period of our anger. So, it's not happening right this minute, but it's delaying our enlightenment that much longer. So I think what seems to be a contradiction there might be cleared up by that. We're getting pretty close here. Nam Kapel points out that how could those who have examined the results of helping and harming others, even for a moment, hold their own welfare above others, be attached to our own welfare while neglecting others. And Venerable says about this, then she goes on to explain more about the gross and subtle self-centeredness and how even just going for our own enlightenment is really leaves behind a lot of people who need our help. And she says that this is exactly why we need these teachings, and this is exactly why we need these reasonings, because it is so easy to slip into even gross self-centeredness that's a little more, it's not subtle, but it's a little more sneaky than our own thoughts of just kind of like, well, I'm not hurting anybody if I just get what I want. That's not harming anybody. That's easy to slip into. And if we don't have these reasonings set up ahead of time, then we will most definitely, even if we do have them set up ahead of time, we still fall into that all the time. I still fall into that all the time. But I'm working on it. And the reasoning, specifically the reasonings of why sentient beings deserve our love and compassion. And she equates that actually to, and having a realistic reason for that, not saying, sentient beings are so nice to me, so they deserve my kindness, and they deserve, having an unrealistic reasoning for that, because that changes too quickly. It's so gone in no time. Suddenly they're criticizing us and we think they're horrible people. And she actually, I think, very accurately puts this together, kind of the similarity with when we're developing self-confidence, and how important it is to develop self-confidence with a basis that's something solid. Because I have seen many people, as she points out, develop their self-confidence based on having a career, having, being beautiful, being strong, being, having all these things that are so transient. And then you watch the suffering that comes afterward, really, really holding that with such value, and then it's bound to leave you. It can't stay. So then who am I? What do I have no value. I've built my self-confidence on something that's transient, and when it goes, I don't know what to do. I'm lost. So to really remember to recognize those things, our self-confidence, and based on valid reasonings, things that are last longer than just, a few years, a lifetime, developing self-confidence based on Buddha nature. And so I think that's really good, bringing that back to our own experience, because I know at times, even in my own life, I have done that. I've placed my own self-confidence based on my ability to do something. So maybe not, all my entire worth as a human being, but, oh yeah, I can do that. I'm really good, I'm really good. I'm a good person, and I'm deserving of, people praising me based on the fact that I'm capable of doing this. And then, you're not capable anymore. And, what do you go through? What is it like when you place your value on your ability to accomplish something, and it's totally cut out from underneath of you? What do you do? I mean, completely lost. That's a horribly painful experience. I think it helps us to grow, but it's horribly painful. Okay, so I think it's time to stop. We have an announcement that next week the teachings will be not happening at 6 o'clock. They will be happening at 7 o'clock rather than 6. So an hour later. This is Pacific time. And please join us, because we're going to be doing the teachings live from Coeur d'Alene. And Geshe Thupten Pelge will be teaching on Tonglen, the taking and giving practice. So, and it's 2 hours long rather than 1, so it's a double treat. You have to hold out, wait an extra hour, but then you get twice as much goodness. So it's worth it. He's a wonderful, wonderful teacher. Okay, so thank you all for joining me. I hope nobody fell asleep. It's all right if you did, though.